Hi guy, thanks for your watching TV. Nick wasn't the kind of man who folded easily under pain. He had survived enough crises to learn that a body could be broken while a spirit stayed upright. So when Matt forced him off the road and the car tore into chaos, Nick still tried to hold on to the last thing he could control, his breathing. But clarity didn't soften the damage. The impact left a brutal truth that couldn't be negotiated. His leg was seriously fractured. And the break in his left fibula was the kind that turned even the smallest movement into a storm of agony. On the gurney, Nick didn't howl like someone defeated. He went quiet in the way people do when they're fighting not to fall apart in front of the ones they love. That silence made the pain feel even more frightening, like a rope pulled tight to its limit, ready to snap without warning. The doctor delivered the update in a calm, clinical tone, as if precision could drain terror from the room. Nick heard the words without truly absorbing them, clinging only to the key fragments the way a drowning man grabs whatever breaks the surface. Surgery, stabilization, monitoring, recovery. Everything moved quickly, efficiently, and that order was the only thing keeping Sharon from shattering. She stood beside him as the team prepared to take him into the operating room, feeling time warp into something unreal. She wanted to hold him back, to keep him within her sight. But she also understood that if she stole even one more second, she'd only add weight to the man already being crushed by pain and fear. Nick went into surgery as someone pushed into a battle he never chose, yet could not refuse. And then the relief they didn't dare expect arrived. He made it through. When he woke up on the January 9th episode, he looked okay. Not okay in a bright or triumphant way, but in the fragile way of someone who has just slipped past a locked door. His eyes opened, his breathing steadied. His face remained pale but no longer twisted with immediate torment. The quiet in the hospital room carried a counterfeit peace. The kind of calm that follows a storm and tricks you into thinking the worst is over. Sharon tried to cling to that moment like a lifeline. She watched every tiny movement, every breath, every slow blink, as if close enough attention could prevent disaster from returning. In her mind, recovery wasn't just a medical process, it was a promise. It was the chance for Nick to come back as himself, not transformed by this accident into something darker, short-tempered, exhausted, hollowed out, dependent on something just to survive the day. Sharon had seen too many people change after a so-called treatment plan. She refused to let Nick become another one of those stories. But Nick's body didn't let them keep the illusion for long. The pain struck without warning, so violent the air in the room seemed to tighten. It didn't build gradually, didn't offer time to brace for impact. It hit like a blade driven straight into his weakest place. Nick clutched his leg, his whole body locking as he poured every ounce of strength into not screaming. This wasn't ordinary post-op discomfort. It had a savage edge, as if something inside his leg was rebelling, signaling that this fight had only begun. Sharon froze in that primal shock that comes when you watch someone you love turn into a living emergency. She didn't need anyone to explain it. Pain like that wasn't just a nuisance. It was a warning. A flare shot into the sky. Nick tried to hold onto control, but his face contorted, sweat beading on his forehead. Jaw clenched hard enough to tremble. He urged Sharon to get the nurse, convinced, forcing himself to believe that a higher dose of pain medication would make it bearable. In that instant, increase the dose sounded like more than a medical request. It sounded like a desperate grip on the fastest escape available. Sharon moved, fast and shaky, to call for help, but with every step her heartbeat scrambled. She kept looking back at Nick, terrified that if she blinked he would be swallowed whole by the pain. And another fear rose underneath the first. Colder and quieter, the fear that this plea for more medication wasn't only about the pain right now, but the first doorway into a darker path, a path many people enter for perfectly valid reasons, and then never fully leave because the mind and body stop being able to tell the difference between need and dependence. Nick lay there trying to breathe through the fire, each wave of pain dragging him deeper. In his mind, Matt was no longer just a name, he was the cause, the shadow, the force that had shoved Nick's life off its track. The accident didn't just break bone, it broke rhythm, it broke safety. It broke the sense of control Nick had always fought to build for himself and his family. Nick hated helplessness. He hated lying still while others decided what he could do, what he could take, how much he could endure. He had always believed he could manage himself. But pain like this taught him something brutal. The body can betray the will, and when it does, a person will cling to whatever promises to silence that betrayal, if only for a few hours. The nurse arrived, calm and swift, moving with practiced efficiency. Sharon tried to stay composed so she wouldn't add chaos to an already dangerous moment. But panic still burned in her eyes. She watched the numbers, the monitors, the way Nick struggled not to tumble into terror. The hospital light was unforgiving, sterile white that didn't feel pure so much as empty. making every wince and every breath look sharper, harsher. Nick kept returning to the same idea: the current dose wasn't enough. And that insistence sent a chill down Sharon's spine in it, because she thought Nick was weak, but because she understood how thin the line was between pain control for healing and pain control for survival. At the same time, another possibility pressed into the room with frightening clarity: maybe Nick's injury was worse than the original diagnosis suggested. Maybe there was a complication, something hidden, something not yet visible on the first scans, something quietly growing beneath the bandages and hardware. The intensity of the pain felt like the body shouting that something was wrong. Like the surgery's success didn't guarantee safety. Sharon found herself trapped between two terrors: the terror of Nick suffering until he couldn't take it, and the terror that rescuing him with stronger medication could trap him in a different kind of nightmare. Nick sensed Sharon's fear, but he didn't have the strength to comfort her. Each wave hit like a blow, leaving him unable to think beyond the next second. He couldn't plan for tomorrow, couldn't weigh long-term consequences. He could only focus on stopping the pain from tearing him apart right now. And that narrowing of time, being forced to live in one unbearable moment after another, was exactly what frightened Sharon most. She knew that when someone is forced to survive second by second, they become vulnerable to anything that offers relief, even if the relief comes with hidden costs. The pain finally eased, just a fraction after intervention. But it didn't create peace. It created a dangerous silency, the kind of quiet that makes you think about the next time it happens. Nick's breathing slowed, eyes closing, his body attempting to loosen its grip on panic. Yet tension still clung to his face like a shadow. Sharon stood close, hands clenched until they ached, as if letting go would invite the room to collapse again. One question kept tightening inside her: was this purely a medical complication, or the first step into a new war fought in private with medication as both weapon and threat? In the hospital, time moves strangely, as if the building itself stretches tense moments to test the human heart. Sharon realized she was wishing for two things that rarely come together. She wanted Nick's pain gone immediately, and she wanted Nick untouched by the seduction of what could numb that pain. She wanted a miracle, but medicine doesn't run on miracles. It runs on choice dosages, assessments, consequence, and on the hard truth that some suffering can't be switched off without paying a price. Then a small detail, almost invisible, landed with more force than any words. As if by instinct, Nick's gaze drifted toward the source of what could make him feel okay again. It was a look so subtle it could be dismissed. But Sharon didn't dismiss it. She felt her stomach drop because she understood how these stories begin with a justified need. That becomes an expectation that becomes dread when it's taken away. Outside the room, the hallway lights stayed steady and bright. The hospital continuing its routine as if nothing world-changing was happening behind this door. But inside, Sharon felt them standing at a crossroads where one wrong step could send Nick slipping into something he couldn't climb out of. If a new diagnosis came, it could rewrite the entire recovery plan. If the pain returned like this again, increase the dose wouldn't be a what-I'm conversation. And if Nick began to tie survival to medication, the battle ahead wouldn't be only about healing bone, it would be about making sure Nick didn't lose himself in the process. The hook arrived like a blink in the dark. Just when Sharon thought Nick had finally fallen into a fragile sleep, the monitor suddenly jumped into an irregular rhythm. Nick's eyes stayed shut, but his hand clenched tight as if he sensed another wave coming. Under the cold hospital light, Sharon felt the truth settle in her chest with terrifying certainty. The next time Nick wakes up, what he needs may not be comfort at all, but a decision that could determine the course of his recovery and everything he becomes afterward. In the episodes ahead, Nick may have accidentally placed a crucial clue on the table about where his story is headed. Next, not through a confession or a public explosion, but through something that sounds completely reasonable after a trauma. He needs more pain medication. That detail, small yet sharp as a needle, carries more weight than any dramatic speech, because in the Newman world, what begins as necessary so often ends as a price. When someone like Nick is used to bracing himself through pressure, used to standing in the storm and pretending he isn't shaking haws to show vulnerability, because the pain is too much, it stops being only physical. It becomes the moment survival instincts brush against the most dangerous territory of all. The place where a person starts to believe there is only one thing that can make tomorrow bearable. If Y&R is laying the groundwork for an addiction arc, that groundwork doesn't need to arrive with a loud bang. It only needs to arrive at the exact moment Nick begins to see pain as an enemy powerful enough to steal everything from him. The unsettling parallel is that the Newman family has never lacked hard lessons about addiction and the aftermath of trying to get clean in a world that never stops attacking you. When Claire came to town and set her sights on the Newmans, She helped pull Jordan into a chain of moves that directly impacted Nikki. And the result was Nikki facing sobriety not as a gentle personal choice, but as a battle forced into the open by a new siege. Nikki, who has always lived in a universe of power and control, suddenly had the one weapon she relied on stripped away, the feeling that she owned herself. What followed wasn't simply a matter of stopping or starting. It was a long, punishing sequence of consequences that clung to her, proving that even when she stood back up, something inside her remained cracked. That crack taught everyone an uncomfortable truth: recovery is not a straight line. It is a labyrinth. And all it takes is one moment of weakness or one shift from the outside for someone to find themselves lost again in the darkness they fought so hard to escape. Now Nick may be standing at a similar doorway, only this time the entrance is disguised as injury and treatment. The accident tied to Matt created a visible wound, a pain that can be measured and documented, pain that can justify medication. And that justification makes the danger more subtle. People can sympathize with Nick for needing pills. People can tell themselves it's normal, post-op, expected. But Nick, deep down, will understand the trap. The more legitimate his need appears, the easier it becomes to drift past the point where relief is a tool and into the point where relief becomes the only thing holding him together. Matt's push didn't just break bone. It yanked Nick out of the familiar illusion that he can always endure. Nick has spent years playing the role of the steady one, the pillar who holds when everything else shakes. And now that pillar has been forced into helplessness. That helplessness is the most volatile fuel of all. When someone who is used to control is made to accept that their own body won't obey, they often split into directions. Either they go numb and chase anything that will quiet feeling, or they become extreme, angry, and obsessive, trying to claw control back through another target. For Nick, that target has a name: Matt. From here, Y&R could be building a chain reaction that begins with Matt's return and ends in a place no one predicted. Nick needing serious help, not only for his injuries, but for what his injuries awaken inside him. The scariest part about chain reactions is that they rarely arrive as one single explosion. They happen through sleepless nights, through fatigue, through the daily performance of pretending to be fine, through the quiet rationalization that one more dose won't matter. And the cruel truth is this: the more reasonable it feels, the less a person notices they're slipping. A storyline like this can be built on whispers, on repetition, on small choices that add up until Nick can no longer tell the difference between pain management and escape. In that picture, Sharon is the most likely person to see what the rest of the Newman orbit, distracted by image, scandals, and power struggles, might miss or refuse to see. Sharon knows Nick beyond his victories. She knows him in the moments where fear hides behind strength. She also understands how Nick converts emotion into action, how he turns uncertainty into rigidity and hurt into revenge. So if Nick starts to slide, Sharon won't need a confession. She'll notice the pattern: the way his days begin to revolve around doses, the way his patience thins, the way he flinches at the thought of pain, as if pain is no longer a symptom, but a threat to his existence. Sharon will recognize the difference between a man healing and a man being pulled somewhere darker. But what makes everything tighter is that the Newman family doesn't have the emotional space to respond to a new crisis in a clean, calm way. Matt's return drags scandal, pressure, and conflict behind it, forcing the family into a kind of gridlock. In that gridlock, Nick's suffering becomes more than personal. It becomes symbolic, a warning sign that the Newmans are not invincible. When someone like Nick goes down, enemies smell blood. And within the family itself, a different struggle begins: the desire to protect the image versus the need to protect the person. Those goals rarely coexist without damage. If Nick starts to feel like he's being treated as a PR problem instead of a human being in pain, he may shut down even harder. And shut down, in Nick's case, doesn't look like surrender. It looks like control, quiet, stubborn, self-directed control that refuses help because help feels like humiliation. Meanwhile, Nick's hunger for revenge doesn't fade. If anything, pain sharpens it. Pain doesn't only weaken people, it can harden them. It creates the sense that the world has wronged you so deeply that you have earned the right to take justice back with your own hands. Matt stops being the man who caused an accident and becomes the face of Nick's helplessness, the source of his humiliation, the reason his life has been thrown off course. Revenge can start to feel like recovery. Nick may believe that if Matt pays, everything will snap back into place. But revenge rarely heals. More often, it just keeps someone busy long enough to avoid looking at the empty, frightened place inside them. And if Y&R is pushing toward maximum tension while keeping the logic intact, then the collision between pain medication and revenge is the perfect pressure point. Nick may become both victim and threat, not because he is evil, but because he is desperate to feel in control again. What's more dangerous is how these two currents can feed each other. The more pain Nick feels, the more he needs medication. The more he relies on medication, the more unpredictable he may become, more rigid, more impulsive, more emotionally skewed as his inner balance shifts. And the more skewed he becomes, the easier it is for him to act on his rage toward Matt. Then, if those actions escalate the situation, Nick gets pushed into more stress, more sleeplessness, more tension, more need to silence what he cannot bear. It becomes a closed-loop effect for a Newman tragedy, a man who tells himself he is fighting for justice while he is actually drifting farther and farther away from himself. If you look back at Nikki's struggle during the era when Claire and Jordan's influence destabilized the family, the pattern is clear. Attacks on the Newmans rarely stop at the surface target. They spread. They press into old wounds. They squeeze what was never fully healed. Nikki's sobriety fight wasn't just personal, it was fallout from a larger assault on Newman's stability. In that same way, Nick's possible dependence on painkillers wouldn't be only his issue. It would be the way Matt warps the family from the inside by damaging a key link in the chain. And when that link starts to crack, every other part of the system is forced to adjust, revealing weakness under pressure. That is exactly what anyone who wants to destroy the Newmans would aim for. You don't have to defeat the whole family. You just have to break the right person in the right place. Sharon sits in the most painful position of all. She wants to protect Nick, but she knows protection cannot mean comforting him with lies. If Nick is drifting toward danger, Sharon will be forced to choose between keeping the peace and confronting the truth. But Sharon also understands something difficult. Nick won't accept confrontation easily. Not because he doesn't love her, but because he is terrified of losing autonomy. He does not want to be seen as someone with a problem. He does not want another label. And he certainly doesn't want, in the middle of plotting revenge against Matt, to have someone pull him away from that mission with warnings about medication. To Nick, that could feel like interference. Sharon could become both his anchor and his obstacle when Nick feels blocked. His instinct is to push harder, not soften. The story still can't close into a clean ending, because one heavy ambiguity hangs in the air. Is Nick's unusually intense pain a sign of dependence beginning to form, or a sign that the original diagnosis missed something more serious? If there is an unseen complication, Nick's insistence on stronger medication could be justified for longer, giving both Nick and everyone around him an excuse to ignore the risk. If it is only post-trauma pain that keeps flaring, then the endurance of that pain will grind Nick's psyche down day after day. Either way, the uncertainty heightens the tension because no one knows what to treat first: body, behavior, or emotion. And inside that uncertainty, Nick may find the easiest escape of all, using the mystery as a shield so he never has to admit what he fears most, that a small pill could start controlling him, when he has always believed he controls the game. Nick's revenge begins to burn like an ember that grows hotter the more it is contained. In his mind, Matt does not deserve to walk away. Matt caused the crash, pushed him into this agony, stole his time, his strength, his advantage. Nick may convince himself that if he doesn't end this, Matt will return and strike again, continuing to damage the Newmans in unpredictable ways. That thought sounds like family protection, but it can also be the cleanest justification for obsession. And obsession, paired with pain and medication, creates a volatile energy, the energy of someone who will cross lines, because they believe they have no other choice. Sharon may see that ember and changes so small Nick doesn't even notice them. His silences get longer. His eyes get darker. His breathing tightens whenever Matt's name enters the room. He becomes tense when the medication begins to fade. Sharon will feel that Nick is not only fighting pain, he's fighting the shame of needing something. And when a man like Nick feels shame, he often chooses anger instead of vulnerability. He chooses action instead of confession. He chooses revenge instead of asking for help. That is why, if Y&R is building toward Nick needs serious help, it won't arrive with Nick accepting it immediately. It will arrive through denial, through pushing people away, through Nick launching himself into a plan that makes everyone's blood run cold. And then help stops being advice and becomes a race to reach him before he goes too far. And so the ending cannot be tied off neatly, because it feels as if the story is still unfolding inside its own silence. Nick's pain being worse than normal is real. The Newman family being trapped in a tightening gridlock because of Matt is real. Nick's desire for revenge is growing, and that is almost impossible to deny. But the most frightening part lives in the spaces between those truths, spaces where Nick could make choices alone before anyone realizes, where Sharon could sense something slipping but still have no proof strong enough to touch, where the Newmans could keep insisting everything is fine, while something quietly fractures from the inside. If a turning point is coming, it may not arrive as a public shock at all. It may arrive in the moment Nick starts using pain as the justification for every decision he makes. while Sharon standing close enough to feel his fear begins to realize that something is moving out of her grasp, slowly, silently, and perhaps not reversible in the ways they have relied on before. On our TV Spoilers channel, I'm always looking for content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting insights. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.